Before Chris Claremont began his run on X-Men, the series started as an all-white, all-American group of teen heroes operating out of a mansion. Hardly an ideal setting by which to comment on the Black experience in 1960s America. Nonetheless, comparisons were made to the ideologies of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King through the Xavier-Magneto binary. These comparisons don't manifest readily on the page, however, and even the most astute reader may struggle to see the validity of the comparison, which, even if true, would simplify the ideologies of X and King to a problematic degree. Nonetheless, Marvel comics of the era were often accused of appropriating civil rights rhetoric in order to connect with campus culture of the 1960s. In that context, the temptation to read X-Men as a civil rights allegory is certainly understandable. When Claremont came on in 1975, the book had just gone international with its roster, and this gave him Storm, a character who Claremont would go on to install as the first African-American superhero team leader at Marvel Comics, an enormous milestone. Carolyn Coca, author of Superwomen, notes that Storm's, quote, introduction is highly stereotyped, end quote, while essayist Carol Cooper notes that Storm, quote, somehow got cast as the mythic Earth Mother matriarch figure critiqued by many black feminists as both unrealistic and racist in its glib projection of inhuman perfection, end quote. Both scholars, indeed perhaps all scholars on the subject of Storm, concede, however, that she got a great deal better from there. To Claremont's credit, a big part of that process involved Storm reconnecting with her heritage, both through her father's side, a photojournalist from Harlem, and from her mother's, a Kenyan tribal princess. In Uncanny X-Men 122, which we discussed in an earlier video essay titled Is Claremont the Master of Long Continuity?, Storm visits her old family apartment in Harlem and learns firsthand, and from Luke Cage and Misty Knight, the institutionalized prejudices of Black America in the 1970s. More elaborately, Claremont has Aurora leave the X-Men entirely in the mid-1980s and take a year-long pilgrimage to her motherland. The result is Life Death 2, a story that has mixed results. On the one hand, exploring the concept of diaspora through Storm and its impact on her sense of self is a really progressive take for a 1980s Marvel comic book, and reads as somewhat analogous to Ryan Coogler's take on Killmonger from the recent Black Panther film. On the negative side, where Coogler infused his cinematic canvas with Afrofuturist themes to create a progressive portrayal, Claremont's Kenya fell back on certain stereotypes of the country, or even continent, as noted by Osvaldo Oyola on the comics criticism website The Middle Spaces. Quote, while Life Death 2 is a narrative departure from the rigmarole of X-Men continuity, taking a breath to try to examine the disjuncture between Aurora's African origins and her superhero identity, it still reinforces a narrative of Africa as impoverished and superstitious. This is something that Life Death 2 continues to reinforce to varying degrees in service of giving Storm a depth not afforded to most, if not all, Black superheroes. Storm would then return from pilgrimage to challenge Cyclops for leadership of the X-Men, win, and become even more badass and self-assured. That understanding her ancestral heritage helped to some degree to get there is an important acknowledgement of the Black experience in America in general. There are, of course, other Black characters in the Claremont run that can give us additional perspective. Misty Knight, a character Claremont wrote extensively outside of X-Men, makes some notable appearances as Jean's roommate, and features quite prominently in a storyline in which the X-Men are conscripted to help defeat Moses Magnum. Misty calls the shots on the operation, commanding the X-Men through their successful assault on the villain. Stevie Hunter is a long-standing background character, a friend of the X-Men and specifically a confidant of Kitty and Illyana. Claremont gives her a rich background as an elite dancer whose career was cut short by injury, though that commitment to depth is by no means unique, as Claremont famously gives most of his background characters a complex backstory as a matter of habit. Nonetheless, Stevie offers a very grounded humanist portrayal, and an important role model for Kitty in particular, frequently helping to provide the X-Man with wisdom and lived experience to cultivate Kitty's maturity, arguably the youngest X-Man's main character arc. Over on the New Mutant side, we have Roberto De Costa, an Afro-Brazilian junior X-Man who would go on to become one of the more dynamic Black characters in Marvel's history just in recent years. Claremont's Bobby was played against type, as something of a wealthy brat character, with a hero's soul buried beneath airs of privilege and a hyper-masculine ego. Since then, X-Men comics have built on the legacy of Claremont's portrayal of Black characters. All combined now, the X-Men universe features a rich tapestry of Black experiences, characters who have solidified the presence of Black superheroes, and characters with the potential to do so for new generations to come. Claremont's work here wasn't always perfect, but it matters that he put in the work of populating his world with black characters and giving their cultural heritage value to their identity. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to learn more about the Claremont Project, you can visit us on Twitter @ClaremontRun or on the web at www.claremontrun.com.